We got to talk about this major announcement of an SEC task force for cryptocurrencies and what it means for you, especially if you are interested in cryptocurrencies, but frankly, even if you are not. Now, let's first start with retail customer. What does it mean that there's going to be a crypto task force? Is this good or is it bad? That's actually very good. In my opinion, what this means is that a security, or in this case, a cryptocurrency, which if it's regulated by the SEC will be considered a security, will require registration. When a security gets registered, a few protections get triggered. First, you have to have a disclosure of all of the beneficial insiders at the company. So, in charge of this token or coin, if you will. So in other words, the organizers are going to have to disclose themselves. They'll probably not only have to disclose who they are, where they are, any kind of legal disclosures they have to protect themselves from lawsuits. So if they've been sued for fraud before because they rug pulled someone, they're going to have to make that disclosure, right? So you're going to see a historical disclosure list of the people who are actually founding these tokens or coins, or who are the insiders, basically. I wouldn't be surprised if they also require some form of basically board, where they say, okay, here are your internal executives, here's maybe a board. Maybe there's even a requirement that one or two of the board members have to be an independent board member in order to actually qualify for registration with the Security Exchange Commission. This would mean that outsiders, or independent outsiders, quote unquote, they could be friends or buddies, right? But just basically people that aren't being paid by those insiders, with the exception of disclosed board member compensation, those individuals would basically put their reputation on these tokens or coins with all of their related disclosures. And so now all of a sudden what you have is basically a whole list of everybody who's involved on the inside. So when there's, let's say, a Trump token that launches, okay, what position does David Sachs have? All holdings over 5%, for example, would also likely have to be disclosed. So, did David Sachs get a little 10%, insider boost for his Trump token holdings? Did Donald Trump have 50%? We can try to backwards this by looking at some of the largest established wallets. But, as with the Trump token, there were a lot of wallets where all of a sudden we're like, how come there are sales popping up, but we never saw them buy any? Well, because they were established insiders and they were basically just issued, their share, if you will. All of that would have to be disclosed, and we have to know exactly what their wallet addresses are, but also likely their identity. So more than just a wallet address, you'd have to have wallet address and identity, which really gives you an opportunity then to kind of follow somebody, unless of course they're like tornado caching, follow somebody through cryptocurrency. It becomes extremely, the world of crypto, it becomes very transparent, if you will, for who insiders are in the world of crypto, which in my opinion is pretty wild. Let's see here. Oh yeah. Okay. So what does this mean for you? Well, it probably is actually going to be really good from the point of view of legal protection. Because if, let's say, Hawk Tuah goes in with her cohort or 5 or 6 friends or whatever, or the people who approached her and said, hey, you should do the Hawk Tuah coin, we're going to know who everybody was on the inside. It's not going to be a random crypto address. So when there's a rugging, you know who to send the lawsuit to. Now, that's intense, because all of a sudden those initial wallets are going to be linked to a person, which is going to actually make it a lot harder to rug someone. Now, obviously, Hawk Tuah, we know who she is, but we don't know who everybody else involved is, right? They could be anonymous wallet addresses with fake names that were, working with her over Zoom or whatever, and you never have any identity verification. So how could you possibly sue them? You can't. So really what you're getting is with a registration of a security, you're going to get a very, very, very transparent ownership regime, which will then unlock a whole new world, see, he's a little under the weather, so I can't sing, not that you want me to anyway, for cryptocurrency lawsuits from attorneys. So if you want to become an attorney now to prepare for what is coming, how do I hear like law hack out there. It's like, you're a cryptocurrency law firm. I got to go buy that domain. That's a good one. Anyway, so now what you've got to do is you ask yourself, okay, cool. So again, what benefit does that have for you? Well, the benefit for you is there's a lower chance that you're going to get rugged. For example, when I do a fundraise for House Hack, which we've got the Reg A coming up soon, that has to go through a qualification process with the Security and Exchange Commission. Like, you basically have to get naked with the SEC. And the whole point is so that, like, you don't screw somebody, but if you do, they know how to come after you, and they just like ban you from the industry and from ever being able to do anything again. And that's, part of why me, like, personally, I've always been like, oh my gosh, I'm about to turn 33. I got a long career ahead. I could make a great stock pick. I can make a bad stock pick. But if you just do something that makes people question your integrity, you're screwed for a long time. It's really bad. And so my goal is always to just be here and be like, look, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to make mistakes, like decision mistakes, but I don't want anybody to question my integrity. So that's why I try to teach my kids too, all 7 of them. Okay, so this is really interesting. It gives you this rugging protection. I also think there'll probably be like some regulations around like, hey, you're not allowed to rug, but you'll also probably have lockup periods, right? So insiders who do an initial coin offering, like a registered, so like an RICO, a registered initial coin offering, like an IPO, they would probably only get through the qualification process or the registration process with the SEC if there are certain investor protections embedded in those. We don't know yet what those are going to look like. I just expect that we're going to have a lot of information on insider information based on the existing securities framework that we have, but then also some additional protections on how to prevent rugging. So in other words, look, if you don't have to do this for stocks. You don't have to put in the lockup when you IPO a stock. Most people do, though. Most people who IPO, they put in like 180-day lockup, 6-month lockup, right? That usually isn't required. It's just so common practice that it's probably going to happen in crypto as well. So now you'd have a 180-day period before, let's say, the insiders of the Trump token or whatever can start dumping on you, which they've already started dumping, right? At least what we're seeing. I'm not saying everybody is. I'm not saying Trump is. I'm just saying somebody who never bought is already dumping, and then there are others. Okay, so now what does this mean from the broker-dealer side? Well, the broker-dealer side is actually a little bit easier. Excuse me. On the broker-dealer side, once a filing is registered, guess what this means? There are now public documents that a broker-dealer like Robinhood or any registered broker-dealer, right? Because Coinbase, for example, isn't a registered broker-dealer. They'd have to become a broker-dealer. They're a crypto exchange, but they're not a broker-dealer. Robinhood is a broker-dealer because there's Robinhood and Robinhood Crypto. Robinhood Crypto is not a broker-dealer. Robinhood is a broker-dealer. So the two different entities have the different regulatory licenses. But now if crypto is going to get sucked into the broker-dealer world, Robinhood already has the established infrastructure for that, which is huge and gives Robinhood a huge leg up. Now, once registered, public filings will be available. So we'll be able to look up an initial filing like an S1. We'll be able to look up all of the insiders information, the insider trades that happen, when the insiders are dumping, when the insiders are buying, when institutions are taking a larger stake or reducing their stake, usually above or below 10 or 5%, right? We'll get to see all of that, which is great. All of those filings will show up on likely every token or coin. Will have a website and there'll be some sort of like investor relations page where you could get these filings, or you just go to the SEC.gov website and pull it up through what's called EDGAR, their filing system. Okay, but what else does this mean? Well, it also gives you protections as a consumer that now your broker-dealer isn't doing funny things with the money they're lending you. So for example, let's say you deposit $100,000 of cash into a broker-dealer, and then you're allowed to borrow stocks up to, say, 50% Reg T margin. That's your initial margin. In English, basically, you could use margin. You have your 100K cash, use margin to borrow another $100,000 of stock borrowed. In this case, it could be crypto borrowed, right? So you deposit 100K, you could go borrow another 100K and buy Bitcoin, let's say, if you want, right? Or whatever, Trump, whatever you want. Okay, cool. Now you have $200,000 of equity. Well, the broker dealer can lend to somebody else up to 140% via Regulation U against the crypto you borrowed. So in other words, they could turn around to somebody else and lend out another $140,000 in margin lending to somebody else, but that's the max. That's the cap. So your account has $200,000 of equity. The broker dealer can lend $140,000. That buffer is designed to give the broker dealer some protection from basically going bankrupt because they gave away or lent out too much of the money you deposited. In this case, there's still a $60,000 buffer. They lend 140, but your account has value of 200,000. Right? So this is all very, very useful. And then there are also minimums, like, if your equity portion goes down under 25%, well, you're going to get margin called and you're going to have to pay off that margin. So this way, on both sides, margin for the customer, Regulation T, margin for the lender, Regulation U, all of a sudden the broker dealer is regulated and there's a lower chance, I'm not saying it can't go bust, but there's a lower chance that the broker dealer goes bust. Like, I don't know, anybody ever heard of FTX? That's a disaster. That's an example of an unregulated exchange having no policies around what they can do with the deposits that they have or the loans that they have. And all of a sudden, when you need the money's gone. See, a broker dealer isn't actually allowed to lend out your cash. That $100,000 cash has to go into a separate account. If you look up Robinhood financial statement right now, you'll actually see cash segregated cash. What is that segregated cash? It's money that sits in that account and is available for immediate withdrawal. So if that broker dealer goes bankrupt, guess what? You could go to the bank that is custodying your money, because Robinhood is not a bank, and you could ask for your $100,000 back from the bank. You don't even have to go through Robinhood because you're listed as a beneficial recipient of that $100,000 of cash. Robinhood can't do jack anything with that cash. Yeah, I think there are some ways they can, well, this is why they want you to put it into their cash sweep account, which then it makes you eligible for yield. And so they kind of play the game with this a little bit. That gets a little bit more complicated. But the point is, from a broker dealer, cash that hasn't been swept to a yield bearing account, cash that just sits there, is a protected item. And it has to be segregated. And so again, this protects you from an exchange, or, well, an exchange will probably be separated. That's another thing. A broker dealer going BK. Okay, so that brings up the whole exchange aspect. You know how there's the New York Stock Exchange, and how the New York Stock Exchange isn't the same thing as Robinhood, where you get to basically interface with the exchange through? Like when you go swipe up on a New York Stock Exchange listed stock, you're doing it through Robinhood or Fidelity. Well, that's basically you putting an input into a broker dealer, the broker dealer putting the input into, let's say, the NASDAQ or the NYSE system, the New York Stock Exchange system, and putting in an order that then market makers at these exchanges can fulfill. And then you get your trade confirmation back, and the broker dealer is responsible for making sure you're getting the security you were promised. You gave Robinhood $20,000. You bought $20,000 worth of Tesla stock. They're going to make sure you got your $20,000 worth of Tesla stock certificates, and they'll hold them electronically, usually in what's called book entry record, which is basically just they put your name on a spreadsheet, right?